Hello. Just a brief note today to follow in away from the last couple of weeks when I've been talking about merriment and the joy that's shared between us. And I've come to this question of the happy reunion with our loved ones after death. Lewis wasn't always convinced about this. In his memoir, A Grief Observed, rocked by the death of his dear wife Joy, he says, "Don't come talking to me about the consolations of religion, or I shall suspect that you don't understand." Unless, of course, you can literally believe all that stuff about family reunions on the further shore, pictured in entirely earthly terms. But that's all unscriptural, all out of bad hymns and lithographs. There's not a word of it in the Bible. So even though he longs for just that sort of reunion with his beloved, he seems to suggest the next life must be so different to the world we know now that it will not be like that. He's particularly dismissive of this sort of easy hope when it became the main focus of people's faith. We must forgive him for being a bit gloomy. He wrote A Grief Observed just a month or two after his wife died, so it was all still extremely raw. The fiction tells a different story. The Great Divorce shows us some characters from the other place arriving on a visit to the borders of heaven, and several of them do indeed meet their loved ones, but in no case is it what you'd call a happy reunion. Most of them arrive with some sort of grudge or lovingly nurtured resentments, and the truth is that those they meet in heaven are already way, way ahead of them in spiritual understanding and dignity and sheer goodness. For something more positive, we have to turn to the last battle, the last of the Narnia Chronicles. And first here, the kings and queens of Narnia are reunited in the new glorified Narnia. And then those who got there first, beyond death, you might say, gather to welcome the newcomers, led by Reepicheep the mouse. And there is, for instance, King Aelion, the father of King Tirion, and he has a long paragraph in the great roll call of Narnian heroes when he meets and embraces his son and welcomes him further into Aslan's country. In the old life, he was a great warrior who fought with giants. Now he's noted for his lively youthfulness. Age is no more in this new place. This was his father, young and merry as he could just remember him from the very early days when he himself had been a little boy playing games with his father in the castle garden at Cair Paravel just before bedtime on summer evenings. The very smell of the bread and milk he used to have for supper came back to him. And Jewel the unicorn anticipates his own happy reunion with King Aelion. Jewel thought to himself, "I will leave them to talk for a little, and then I'll go and greet the good King Aelion. Many a bright apple has he given me when I was but a colt." But the next moment it's Diggory and Polly who are reunited with Fledge, the great winged horse from the magician's nephew. And then everyone you ever heard of, if you knew the history of these countries, seemed to be there. There was Glimfeather the owl and Puddleglum the marsh wiggle and King Rilian the disenchanted and his mother, the star's daughter, and his great father Caspian himself. And close beside him were the Lord Drinian and the Lord Bern and Trumpkin the dwarf and Trufflehunter the good badger with Glenstorm the centaur and 100 other heroes of the great war of deliverance. And then from another side came Cor, the king of Archenland, with King Lune, his father, and his wife, Queen Aravis, and the brave prince Corin Thunderfist, his brother, and Bree the horse, and Hwyn the mare. And then, which was a wonder beyond all wonders to Tirion, there came from farther away in the past the 2 good beavers and Tumnus the fawn, and there was greeting and kissing and handshaking and old jokes revived. You've no idea how good an old joke sounds when you take it out again after a rest of 500 or 600 years. And the whole company moved forward to the centre of the orchard where the phoenix sat in a tree and looked down upon them all. And at the foot of that tree were 2 thrones, and in those 2 thrones a king and queen so great and beautiful that everyone bowed down before them. And well they might, for these 2 were King Frank and Queen Helen, from whom all the most ancient kings of Narnia and Archenland are descended. And Tirion felt as you would feel if you were brought before Adam and Eve in all their glory. A hint there, perhaps, that we might indeed one day ourselves meet the great Adam and Eve in all their glory. And then, of course, Lucy's reunited with Mr. Tumnus. And after that, of course, they all meet Aslan, and nothing is ever the same again. And as he spoke, he no longer looked to them like a lion, but the things that began to happen after that were so great and beautiful that I cannot write them, whatever that might mean. Well, that's the fiction. But also at the end of his theological book, Letters to Malcolm, chiefly on prayer, and this trumps a great A Grief Observed, I think, as it was published after it, so it has the last word. And Lewis imagines our joyous day of resurrection at the end of time when he says, "The birds will sing out and the waters flow and lights and shadows move across the hills and the faces of our friends laugh upon us with amazed recognition."